I am delighted to be working with you today. It's a pity that we can't see each other face to face, but I hope one day that that will again become a reality. Nevertheless, the marvels of teaching and working and training online allow me to be interacting with you today. And as you said, yes, my topic is how to make your conversations fierce. And it's intentionally a bit of an obscure title to kind of hook your interest because fierce sounds like such a negative word. But of course, I don't want to be working with you today to see how we can become more aggressive. That's definitely not my intention. In fact, this morning while I was drinking my coffee, I thought about how I would describe what this talk is about. And the talk is about change. It's about adaptability. It is about relationship building. It's about progress. And it's about reality, which aren't always words which we would associate with being English teachers, but which I think are more relevant than ever in the field in which we work. So what I would like to do, first of all, is to have a look at professional development and why those topics are of interest to us when we decide what route we are going to go down as English teachers. And then we're going to have a look at the topic of fierce conversations, which is a very specific concept, which I looked into about 6 months to a year ago when I was working out what direction I want to take my teaching in. And as a result of a training course which I attended, I have brought a tool with me, which I think is very interesting for you in your daily lives, in your teaching careers, and in your classrooms. It's something very adaptable and very interesting in order to create change and to make conversations more real and for us to help bring situations forward and make progress. So, first of all, we will have a look.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
I have been teaching English for 24 years. I started in the year 2000. And I started it just for fun. A friend of mine had done a very intensive teaching course in Poland, and she wanted to travel the world. And I thought, wow, that sounds so cool. And so I did the same course, and I have never stopped teaching English. It changed from being just fun to being a real career. So to demonstrate to you where it's taken me, if I can, here we are. I did my course in the year 2000, and I've been able to work all around the world. I started in Germany, in Dresden in the east. I came back to Germany in the middle of my teaching, and I have ended in Germany. And I hope my career hasn't come to an end, but I am based now full-time and permanently in the south of Germany. I have, however, taught in Newcastle, which is my hometown in the UK. It's very beautiful. I'm there now. Actually, this is my mother's dining room. I'm on holiday. I was able to use my English teaching career to visit South America, where I spent 3 years in Ecuador. And I also spent 3 years in Spain. So I got to realize my dream of traveling. Also language learning. Russian is so top of my list, but you need time and dedication to learn Russian, but I'm a very, very avid language learner. I'm also, because I have decided to stay in this career, and it is a job in which there are many, many people competing for work, at least in Europe. I have had to develop the kind of skills that I have. So I began as a teacher, teaching general English, low levels, high levels, and I've had to move towards English for specific purposes, which I'll talk about a little bit later. After a few years of experience, I moved into teacher training because I was able to share the kinds of successes and failures which I had had with other teachers. I spent 7 years as a training manager in a very large language school, organizing courses and working with mostly companies, although there were some private individuals. So I've been able to do a lot of goal setting, working with the financial aspect of things, human resources, training new teachers. I've also spent about 15 years working on a freelance basis, which is very hard, but depending on your situation, very lucrative. I was employed. I currently am employed now by a state school. I've done a lot of materials writing. I've done materials writing for very large courses, for example, for the British Council Online. And one of my great passions is soft skills and communications. It's a passion which I have stumbled across, but it's a passion which I tried at first to develop because I could see the way that the industry was going. And what I'm trying to do with this list of information is not to tell you how fantastic I am, because I'm just an average teacher, but to show you the way in which my career has had to develop in order to adapt to the market in which I work and to maintain enough custom coming in, especially as a freelancer. So this is the point at which I thought I would throw a question out to you. If anybody would like to volunteer to answer, then do. You can switch your microphone on. Alternatively, you want to, you can chat into the chat box. Why do you think that professional development is so essential? What do you think the benefits are to you, to your career, to your industry of always keeping on learning? I'll show you the things that I wanted to share with you. For me, the benefits of lifelong learning are staying relevant. The less you learn and the less you develop, the less interesting you are to potential clients. Don't forget that I come very much from a business English background. So when I talk about clients, I'm thinking of people who are currently at work rather than young people who are still at school. Adaptability is absolutely key to the kind of dynamic industry in which we work. If we fail to adapt, then we fail to make progress and we fail to stay relevant. I think it's very interesting for our learners and for the tasks which we present them with, if we have new input to be able to offer them, which in turn is not just better for the learning outcomes, for the results of our students who are more motivated and more interested and more engaged, but also for us as teachers. We feel like we are achieving our goals better when we have more knowledge behind us, when we've got more skills. And as a person who's worked on a freelance basis, teaching directly with the people who are paying the bills, the better we're able to connect with our students, the more we're able to engage them, means that we have a higher level of retention. They're more likely to come back to us for classes. And of course, that means that our income is steadier or greater. And considering the cost of living worldwide, this is a really, really important point to focus on. So we've looked at professional development. I would like you to think about these two questions now. Changes which we are facing specifically in the ELT industry, and what do we need to consider about the future of our jobs? And I think this is a very timely question, considering I caught the end of your last presentation and I saw that it was about chat GPT and things like that. Are there any other changes which you think we're facing as English teachers, and how do you think we need to adapt in order to maintain our jobs in the future? Perhaps you could write your answers again in the chat box, or if anybody would like to volunteer to say something, anything that's happening apart from just chat GPT, which seems to make everybody quake in their shoes, but it's not necessarily something which we need to be too scared about, depending on how we teach. Okay. Online platforms for lessons, yes. That's a big change. Rather than going to a customer directly. I worked with a school who has now closed their offices because after 23 years of teaching, they no longer need to have a school in which people will visit. So definitely online teaching is extremely important. We need to keep motivated to continue teaching, this is right. Any other changes which we're facing apart from the development of artificial intelligence and chat GPT? Is there anything which you've seen has changed maybe in society? People have less time for actively learning. That's right. Yes, we're doing so much. We're taking part in so many different activities. We've got so many priorities and people are juggling. And I question sometimes to what extent we're doing things well when we have so many goals, so many things that we want to focus on. Looking at social media as well, there's so much information we have in our head. Things are changing. We're bored very easily. So committing to things is very difficult for people. I'll have a look at one more. People want to acquire a language within a short period of time. That's right, which is very unrealistic. Students have shorter attention spans. Absolutely, they do. I work in a vocational school now, and the use of mobile phones and scrolling of reels, it really has changed the way that people's brains work. It's very hard. Short courses, quick results, this is right. And this means that we need to focus on what it is exactly we're teaching and why we're teaching it. So I'll move on now and I'll have a look at some examples that I came up with. The first of which is, and the topic which you talked about, is people expect flexible learning. So you mentioned online platforms, you mentioned, or you looked previously at ChatGPT. Virtual reality and artificial intelligence, it's unbelievable today how these things are taking over our lives, how they're influencing our lives. And to a certain extent, it does have a benefit to us because we can, with flexible learning, we can allow our students to go away and do the boring things like grammar and fixed vocabulary, listening practice through these fields of virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So it does offer us some benefits as well as being potentially a drawback. It's not necessarily the worst thing. But we need to keep in mind that if we're trying to develop ourselves as teachers, we need to be able to use some of these tools effectively and think about what kind of challenges they pose for us. Another point which I think is very interesting is we have to consider the level of English on average of our learners. If you have a look at this diagram, it shows us that the level, for example, Germany is here in the middle. Germany has a very, very high level of English. That means that the learners, when they finish school, are expected to have a really high level. And what I see in the workplace when I come to teach them is that I have absolutely no need to teach general English ever. It's totally irrelevant. Business English is expected when somebody enters the workplace, and what I'm doing is mostly communication training in English. And in fact, a lot of the companies in the area in which I work have stopped paying for business or general English classes for their employees. They expect that if their level is not on the average level, that they have to fund that individually, and the only thing that they will pay for is communication training. Now, Russia is an enormous country, and I don't know the background of why the level of English is lower. Maybe there was a resistance to learning English. Maybe there was a priority of other languages over English. But I think if you follow the trends that in the future, the levels of language learning in terms of English worldwide will rise, you will see that in most countries, there will be a move away from general English to business English, then business English to communication learning. And this is a challenge that we need to be aware of as teachers. How am I going to adapt to my future market? The next point which we will look at is English for specific purposes. I don't know, have any of you taught English for specific purposes? Do you know what's involved? If I put that question out there to you quickly, perhaps I can define it for you. And I would say that if you have a look at these words, English for specific purpose is teaching people in very specific fields of work or disciplines of academic studies how to communicate, what language they will need, and how to be able to perform their jobs better through English. So if I have a look at the comments that have just been put down here, exactly, yes, English for marketing, for example, rather than just for business, English for marketing is more specific. So it's looking specifically at marketing vocabulary and marketing situations, or for medicine, or for English for HR or for psychotherapists. Wow, that's really specific. So if you're teaching English for psychotherapists, you need to invest a lot of time, if you don't come from that field, to be able to teach people working in that field. And it's not impossible. English for tech specialists or job interviews, exactly, if you're working in HR. English for job interviews so that people can complete a specific type of task. That means that you need to be able to research or already know the kind of vocabulary that they will need to be able to use to teach it adequately. So this is a very, very growing field. This goes back to what we've talked about with quick results, short courses, and things being very, very focused. In order to be able to move into a field like that, we need to be able to commit to researching for a greater amount of time, which means making less money per hour because you are researching more, or learning about a specific field so that you can go and work in it and go into a niche market. Okay. So, and there was another point which I think is increasingly being looked at, and that is the expectations of the learner in regards to their learning experience. So rather than people just coming to your class in order to learn words and grammar or to be able to do jobs better, they want to be given some support in the terms of mindfulness and social emotional learning. Now, what I mean, if you don't know about mindfulness, is things like being able to be self-aware, being able to set goals. It's expected that teachers can give support and encouragement and to help people to be able to analyze their own learning strengths and learning weaknesses. And this is an area that in the last few years, I have really seen benefits from working on with students. Some of the students with whom I've had the greatest results have been students with whom I would say I spent 50% of the time training the language that they needed and 50% of the time training their emotions and their goal setting skills. So it's definitely an area which I would encourage anybody to look at: mindfulness in teaching and social emotional learning. Hugely interesting. And I think if you are looking to work in a niche area, definitely worth investigating. It's a real selling point for you, and it will definitely help you progress. It also helps you to think about you and your teaching and your professional development too. So, very important.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
Okay, so we've had a look at professional development. I will quickly have a look at this topic, which is just to say from my perspective in the industry in which I work and the environment in which I work, there are ways in which you can stand out from the crowd. Obviously, education and qualifications are of interest, but we are, as you mentioned at the beginning, becoming more flexible. People's expectations are changing. And at least in Germany, where I teach, people are starting to place less emphasis on what you have on paper and more on the skill set that you can bring. This includes the kind of teaching experience you've had, the range of customers, versatility. We talked about adaptability at the beginning, versatility in what you can teach. Certification, if you are able to take part in any kind of further education courses, like the Fierce Conversation course, which I took, and you can get certification in it. That also brings a lot to the table. These are value-added skills. And when I mention community engagement, what I mean is, are you involved in teaching associations? Are you involved in any specific special interest groups related to teaching? Are you involved in sharing materials? Do you take part in teacher training with any kind of recognized groups? And I have found in the last few years that adding this kind of information to my CV or bringing it up in job interviews has really, really helped me, first of all, to gain the position at all, but also to negotiate the salary that I have. So are there any questions which you have so far? No, I'll leave the question if anybody's got anything that we'd like to ask or to say. It's clear. Okay, perfect. Now, no questions for now. Perfect. Okay, then let's have a look. These are the kind of things which I have done, and then we're going to have a look at the Fierce Conversation. So I started with a certificate in English language teaching to adults. I did an in-depth technical English training with an organization which sadly now doesn't exist, which is why I haven't put their name on there, because you wouldn't be able to do the same training. Through International House, I have done an ESL certificate for very young learners. As when I had very young children, I decided I would test out teaching in that field, but it wasn't for me, unfortunately. Having small children at home and having to manage them was more than enough. I have done a master's in applied linguistics, which looks good on paper, but honestly didn't bring my career prospects very far forward. I have taught and trained in ongoing workshops. This means teaching associations in DE is for Deutschland, for Germany, teaching associations worldwide. I have trained other teachers all over the world. I'm currently doing a diploma at the Institute of Leadership and Management because I teach a lot of senior managers. And about 6 months ago, I completed a course to become a Fierce Conversations trainer. And that's the main topic of what we're going to have a look at now. When you think of a fierce conversation, what do you think that means? Would you like to suggest what it means? And I'm going to close my door, if you could give me a second, because somebody has started building works in the garden next door. But perhaps while I'm doing that, could you maybe chat in the chat box? What do you think a fierce conversation is? Any ideas of what would make a conversation fierce? Using emotions, but no facts. Being very confident. Being honest. Honest is such a good answer. Honest, and as a result of that, effective. Absolutely. A conversation full of emotions. Now, depending where you are coming from, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Have any of you heard of fierce conversations? Or is this a new idea to you? Yes, participants are totally involved. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it could be something which has a big impact on your emotions. Long term, probably yes. Dialogue dynamics. Poor. That sounds fancy. But yes, you're absolutely right. What role does the dialogue have in the conversation? Okay. Well, Fierce Conversations is based on a book. I'll show you a picture of the book, and it's a book that I recommend reading. You can see it is 22 years old. Fierce Conversations, Achieving Success at Work and in Life, One Conversation at a Time. So it's a book by an American lady called Susan Scott. She wrote it a couple of decades ago, but it is still extremely relevant. And I think, honestly, when I look at it, it's based on a very simple idea. And the idea is, and the mainstay of her methodology is that while no single conversation is guaranteed to transform a company, a relationship, or a life, any single conversation can. What Susan Scott's main message is that the conversation you have with someone is the relationship that you have with that person. Whether it be at work, whether it be with your students, or whether it be with your partner or your children, if there is no conversation and no dialogue, there is no relationship. And these conversations need to be as open and as honest and as brave and as bold as they can be, because everything we don't say has the potential to destroy the relationship. So your fierce conversations are being open and directly addressing a situation, even if it's an uncomfortable situation, with the goal that that will improve the progress of the relationship, of the family, of the work relationship, of the company, and it will avoid conflict. And this was something that I thought was a really, really interesting thing to think about as an English teacher, bearing in mind the changes in what we're teaching and how we are teaching, and bearing in mind the kind of niche area that I wanted to move into, which was soft skills rather than just language teaching. And so I went ahead and I did a course on this. If you're interested, I'll give you my details later on that you can contact the people with whom I did the course, but it was super interesting. And first of all, we began by looking at what are the principles of a fierce conversation, and then looking at tools that I can use as an English teacher moving into the areas of soft skills. So first of all, let me go ahead and introduce where this came from. Susan Scott, she was a coach, a business coach, and she worked in a think tank. And that means that she would go to very, very large organizations and give them coaching skills on how to problem solve, how to deal with their employees, how to improve communication. And to give you some statistics as to why it's so important, if you have a look here, just have a quick look at this cartoon. I think this describes really well the difference between what somebody says and what is done or how they are supported through miscommunication. Why is it relevant? It's relevant because lack of clarity, if you are not clear in what you want, you will not get what you want. The Economist intelligence unit, this is a British-based but internationally recognized research unit which provides articles and information about business all over the world. They demonstrated that 85% of people recognize if you are not clear in your cross-border communications, so where you're using English as the lingua franca for communicating with people from different cultures, different geographical regions, you are going to get worse results. In fact, if you look at the type of worse results, it's not just about losing money, but if you are communicating poorly at work, you are increasing people's stress, you are delaying the finishing point of a project, people have low morale, their own performance goals are not achieved. For those who are achieved, I would imagine that they're achieved on the poorer end rather than on the stronger end. They are placing obstacles to innovation there. So they are not being able to develop because of the poor communication. When we get down to the finances, this means that we can not close sales. The company will not make money. They will lose their clients. They will move away. And in some cases, it could even make a disciplinary action occur so that the people lose their jobs, the staff lose their jobs. So as you can see, there's a huge number of people who recognize that there are situations of poor communication and there are really detrimental effects of that. And the people who are mostly seen to be responsible are the people at the top of the company, the management, the leaders. And here's another statistic which says a mere 13% of employees strongly agree that the leadership of their organization communicates effectively with the rest of the organization. That means, if my maths works out, 87% of employees think that their bosses communicate poorly, which is a really devastating figure. If we're thinking about fierce conversations as well in terms of our own relationships, as a mother of the family being the leader, or in work with our team, with the boss of our school, I am convinced that these kinds of statistics are transferable, that often people who have the responsibility for a family, a relationship, a project, a team, could benefit tremendously by changing the way in which they communicate. So, why is it relevant to us? In our lives and in our teaching, in our classrooms, and for our students, our main goal is to be able to perform better. If we are interested in professional development, we want to improve ourselves. And there are different ways in which we can focus on that. We can focus on it through coaching, through asking the right kind of questions, through language, through choosing the correct words and thinking about how those words influence the tasks we're trying to complete, hugely through interpersonal skills and leadership. And from my own perspective of working towards getting jobs in a very niche market, these are the 2 points in which I am concentrating my own professional development. So we'll have a look. There are 7 main principles of these fierce conversations, 7 main things which Susan Scott in her book recommended that we need to look at in order to be able to make our conversations real and effective. The first one is that we need to be able to interrogate reality. That sounds like a very aggressive situation, so it would fit in with the fierce concept. But what she's actually meaning by this is that we need to regularly question a situation and check that how we see things is still relevant. In any kind of relationship, be it at work or your personal relationships, things can change, and how people see the situation can also change. Therefore, we should regularly address the situation and check that our understanding of how things are going are still the current state of play. It's still what's currently happening. So that's the first part, interrogating reality. The second part is that we need to be able to come out from behind ourselves into the conversation and make it real. Without being derogatory, this is, for me as a British person, a very American phrased thing. It's one of these sentences which maybe sounds quite fancy, but is a little bit unclear. But what Susan Scott is trying to say is that it's very important to have these conversations to make them real. People react better long-term to people who will address the problems than people who try to avoid them. So nobody likes to deal with conflict. We tend to shy away from it. We tend to avoid it. But what we're doing there is avoiding the situation and stopping ourselves from making progress and potentially losing customers, friends, teammates, and definitely our ability to succeed. So this coming out from behind yourself is do not shy away from the problem. address the problem, create an environment in which people can be honest, ask probing questions to make the conversation real. The next principle that she discussed is be here and be prepared to be nowhere else. If you are having a conversation with somebody, make sure that you approach each conversation as if it was the most important conversation that you are going to have. That means staying focused, listening actively, giving somebody your undivided attention, asking genuine questions. The fourth one is to tackle your toughest challenge today. Some of you may have heard of the idea of to eat the frog. And that means to deal with the thing that you're looking forward to least, or which will cost you the most energy or the most work at the beginning of your day, to make sure that you can prioritize what you're working on. You shouldn't avoid problems, you should confront them, commit to resolving the problems. This means prioritizing your work lists and hopefully maximizing how you use your time and resources. So this is 4 of the principles. There are 3 left. The 5th one is to obey your instinct. This means that if you are having a conversation with somebody and the topic is important, then speak up if you get an instinct that the situation is not right. Don't brush it under the carpet and think I'll discuss that with them another time, but come forward and mention what you think is not going well. If you're having difficult conversations, don't let your inner fear of confrontation get in the way of your instinct. And good instincts are formed through well-informed decision-making, having a good relationship with people, finding out about those people, keeping in contact with them, and getting a good feeling. Okay. The 6th principle is, it says, take responsibility for your emotional wake. That means you need to work on your own emotions. You need to find out, what do I do which has an effect, a negative effect on other people? That means that if you are communicating with somebody, you need to be able to ask for feedback and process feedback on what you do and what you say. It could be your body language, but what are you going to do to wake up to how you communicate with people? Think about the tone that you use. Do you have a friendly tone? Do you have an interested tone? And the delivery of how you communicate with people. And the final point is to let silence do the heavy lifting. And when we say let silence do the heavy lifting, I think this is something that at least I am very bad at, using the silence to have a specific role, which is if you're, for example, somebody asks you a question and you pause before you answer the question, that is a time in which you are giving yourself a moment to think about how you want to respond. And also it allows the person who asked you the question to recognize that you really are interested in the question that they asked and it's important to you. It signals commitment to giving a well thought out answer. So silence is a tool for reflection, a tool for processing what has been discussed or what has been asked, and to also deepen your understanding. It's not something which we need to be afraid of. So again, I'm going to show you the principles. I'll just run through them quickly. Before I thought I had listed them, but I obviously didn't. So I'll just flick through them. It's interrogating reality. It's coming out from behind yourself into the conversation, making a conversation real. It's being here and being prepared to be nowhere else. It's tackling your toughest challenge today, obeying your instincts, taking responsibility for how you communicate and the emotions which wake in other people, and letting silence do the heavy lifting. Now, just to ask you a quick question, are there any of those things that you already think it would be interesting for you to work on? Silence is one of the pillars of Socratic dialogue. Absolutely, it's so, so important, but people still hate it. Do any of you feel that you would benefit from working on one of those principles or a specific principle? And don't forget, we're not just thinking about teaching business people, we're also talking about how we communicate in our daily lives. Unfortunately, I can't show. I don't know why, but one of the slides has disappeared. I can run through them all again. Can I run through them all again? You'll get these slides at the end so that you can review what they are. And I certainly recommend reading the book. But interrogating reality, seeing if how you understand the situation has changed, coming out from behind yourself, confronting difficult situations, even if you don't like it, focusing on the other person, being prepared to be here and not being distracted, tackling your toughest challenge today, prioritizing the most difficult thing that you have to talk about, obeying your gut instincts, taking responsibility for how you create emotions in the other people, and allowing silence to be part of the conversation. The one where the emotions needs honing, exactly, yeah. Same comes for being present. For you, it's coming out from behind yourself. Yeah, it's really hard. Taking responsibility for your emotions. It's very, very difficult, especially as teachers sometimes, I think, to admit that we need to improve ourselves. We are so focused on helping somebody else to improve themselves that we focus on the emotions, that we don't focus on how we are negatively affecting other people. And asking for feedback is a really tricky thing to do. So you'll get the slides, or you can have the slides certainly after the talk. I certainly recommended, I would certainly recommend reading the book Fierce Conversations, because Susan Scott goes into all of these areas with some really excellent examples of why they're important, and examples of how to do these different points. But what she also presents us with are some tools that we can use. And there's one which I think is really, really interesting, which is the beach ball method. And here's another question for you. She uses the beach ball as a symbol for communication. Communication which can be really good, but communication which can be really poor. How do you think a beach ball would be a good symbol for communication? What do you think it represents? Again, perhaps it's something that you could talk about in the chat quickly. The beach ball could represent different opinions. Yes, and it's about throwing your ideas to somebody else. About interaction. Yeah, a lot of people use beach balls and any kinds of balls when they're doing conversation activities, on day one, warm-up activities to talk about yourselves. It could be motivating. A beach ball looks motivating. It's got very motivating colors. What I would like to do is to show you a short video. The video is about a minute long. And the video, it will explain to you why exactly the beach ball is such a good symbol for effective communication in teams. Somebody else has written it's about communication in a group and ability to be a team. It is very much. Now, I know that last time I tried to show a video, there was no sound, so I will just test it out, and perhaps if you hear nothing, you can let me know.
The principle of the beach ball is one of...
Did you hear something there? Yes, perfect. Okay, then let's put it back to the beginning. It's 1 minute and 21 seconds, and it'll explain to you what this beach ball method is about. I'll take away those horrible pictures at the bottom.
The principle of the beach ball is one of the most powerful principles on perspective taking that you can bring into a facilitation. Imagine that there was a beach ball in the center of the room. Based on my perspective, my senses, my expertise, my experience, everything that I am is telling me that this beach ball is red. So what's the first thing that someone on the other side of the room thinks when they hear me say that? That I'm wrong. How could that possibly be? From their perspective, the beach ball is clearly blue. The principle of the beach ball tells us to hold the space for all perspectives. No one can see an entire beach ball from one perspective. That's impossible. What we're going to be working on today will be a lot more ambiguous than a beach ball. No one will have the one perfect perspective. There's no such thing. Trust in your colleagues that when they share what they share, they're giving you a glimpse of their perspective. And challenge yourself to say, how might all these perspectives be true? By bringing in all perspectives, we get a clearer picture of the whole. I've heard the principle of the beach ball used by many facilitators, including Elise Yanker and Nancy Reuscher, so I'm not sure where it originally came from. I use it so often that I actually carry a little inflatable beach ball with me to help make the point. The little beach ball also serves as a pretty good talking stick.
There we go. So you covered some of the ideas that represent what the beach ball method means, but just to rephrase it in my own words, it's talking about different ways in which we see a situation, and that if we ignore all the different perspectives of this particular situation, then we're at risk of losing opportunities and also damaging relationships. And what I think when I see a problem is only one part of the reality. It's just how I see it. Somebody for whom this is also important will see this situation in a totally different light. And if I don't give them the opportunity to share their perspective in a way which is honest and non-conflictive, then I am going to lose my ability to improve the situation. My potential will be lowered, and certainly my ability to have real discussions with the people who are in my family, my team, my company. So this principle tends, I don't want to show that to you again. This principle is encouraged by Susan Scott to discuss situations such as when you have to make a really important decision which will have a big effect financially or creating change, again, within a family, within a team, within a company. It's very helpful if you're designing strategies to look at all of the different perspectives. It could be how you discuss your holiday destination, but it could also be how you restructure a company. It can go from something very small to something very large. It's about evaluating opportunities. You may see something as a great benefit, but other people may see it as a dreadful, dreadful drawback. And solving problems, getting people to give you different perspectives on a problem in which you have, and allowing them to be authentic and to tell you really and honestly how that you could deal with that situation will open up your perspectives and to allow you to find a much more effective solution potentially to a problem. So what I thought we could do is, because I really like this method, I've used it in my English classes, I've used it in my personal life, I've used it in the school in which I work. I thought I would give you the chance to, so I'm just going to skip over that. I thought I would give you the chance to test this out yourself. And what we're going to do is, hopefully in breakout rooms, in groups of 4 or 5, we're going to use a form which you can use and take away. I've put a link here, but I know that Christina was going to share it with us. And this is a preparation form. And the success of having a beach ball meeting is preparing yourselves. Obviously, you couldn't because this is a conference and we don't give you homework beforehand. But if you are going to try and do this in your team, in your group, in your family, you could fill this out beforehand. What we're going to do is to focus on the first 2 points, which is describing an issue and explaining why it is important. So, for example, if we focus on problem solving today, I would like you to, when you get the form, to either make some notes about a problem that you're experiencing and why it is important. You don't need to talk about something incredibly personal, but my example would be that I have taught a group of ladies for the last 8 years. They will not do any goal setting with me, and I don't know what to teach them. That's my issue. I have a group over the last 8 years. I cannot get them to identify what their goals are. And the reason why that is significant to me is because I really have developed a dislike of teaching these ladies because I don't know what to do with them. And as a result, I don't feel like we're achieving anything. And I'm very achievement driven, and that's causing me big problems. So what our goal is going to be in the next 10 to 15 minutes is to put you into groups. You should get the preparation form and fill in the first 2 points, an issue you're having and why it's significant. When you have finished on these 2 points, can you share the problem in your group and decide on one problem which you want to focus on? So maybe somebody in the group has got a really interesting point to discuss. And the other people are going to be the listeners. So the speaker will go through the rest of the points on that form, including your ideal outcome, relevant background information that the people might need to know. When the speaker has gone through those points, listeners can give their ideas and suggestions on how to solve the problem. The speakers do not need to interact and interrupt. This is just gathering perspectives. So all you have to do is to listen and write down some notes. So you have step 1, which is writing down and then sharing the problem and identifying one for your group to focus on. Step 2 is the speaker giving more information from the rest of the preparation form and listeners giving ideas and suggestions, which the speakers will just write down basic notes, but will not interrupt because this is a listening activity. So Christina has very kindly shared the document, which is on the Google Drive. As you can imagine, it's very frustrating to start an activity and not really be able to dedicate the time to it. And the idea of this was just to give you a very, very, very quick view of how you can use a tool like this to be able to have an open and honest conversation with somebody, with your peers, with people who can share their perspectives, with people who you may work closely with, or with people who would be in the same organization, but you don't work so closely with them. If it was at a language school, you might have discussed your problem with your boss, with a new teacher with no experience, with a teacher with 20 years experience. In my group, we were talking about younger learners. So I might have this conversation and ask people to contribute who've never taught young learners, who've got 20 years experience teaching young learners, who only ever teach business English or only teach adults, because we all see a situation in a different way. And if we have an open and honest environment, we can always contribute something. And sometimes these small ideas and quick contributions can have a tremendous influence on our decision making, on our reality, on our ability to bring about change. And this is the whole idea of these fierce conversations. What am I potentially damaging by not creating a real and honest situation in which adaptability and progress is possible? Julia will share my slides afterwards, and included in the slide is a link to the meeting, the name of the book. I totally recommend reading it, and I must apologize for not being able to give everybody enough time to share the results of their quick conversation. But I do encourage you to try the conversation again at a different time in a different environment.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
My feelings about Fierce Conversations, the book and the tools which are presented are that it's something that I need to practice. One short or two short interactions with the tools like the beach ball model of conversing with people is not enough. I need to test these things out. I certainly feel a little bit out of my comfort zone. I live in Germany where people are very direct, very authoritarian. They say what they think and they don't want to hear what other people think and they don't like conflict. And I've lived there for a long time. So working in a totally different way, it will take me time to be able to take on this approach, but I see the clear benefits. Not everything is applicable to me. I am very open. So interrogating reality, I would imagine that I do that anyway. So there may be some of the principles where you say, well, that's not relevant for me or my situation, but other ones are. And I think it's very important to be able to pick and choose at new skills rather than feeling forced to take things on. Some of the tools are very interesting. Clear communication, we know, is always good. Our idea of what clear communication is could be broadened. And it's always difficult and bad to make assumptions about what other people are thinking, how other people are, and regular contact and regular questioning through open communication is always a good strategy. So I've come from all kinds of different perspectives, lots of different ideas, professional development, why it's important, where we are going, how development will help us make money, help us improve as people and communicators. I hope it was clear to you. I hope it was interesting to you. I hope it helps you to adapt.